It looked dicey there for a minute. The Miami Dolphins, which had won 3 straight season openers as a franchise, looked a little bit rough in the second half, but somehow the defense tightened. Tua Tagovailoa and the offense and Jason Sanders got their act together, and the Miami Dolphins managed to pull out a 20-17 victory over the Jacksonville Jaguars. Miami is state champions. Not really, because they lost to Tampa Bay in the preseason and don't play them anymore right now, but they're off to a good start. Right now, I'm going to bring in my colleague, Barry Jackson, coming from Cell Block 39, who had the wonderful experience of not only watching the game, but actually covering not incarcerations, how do we describe it when you're not arrested, but you're put in handcuffs?
Well, he was detained. He was given a citation. And the latest chapter in the bizarre history of the Miami Dolphins, which includes Bullygate, it includes an assistant coach snorting cocaine off his desk.
Hey, it's a white powdery substance. It's not cocaine. We cannot prove it's true. Cocaine.
It's an unknown white substance. We're not sure what the substance is. It also includes the former head coach suing the owner of the team. So there's been a long history of Miami Dolphins soap operas today, the latest. We'll get to that in a moment. But I have to tell you about today's game. I went from the feeling that I had that I've expressed to you on the show about being deeply, deeply concerned about their offensive line, their defensive line, to in the second half, just feeling a lot better about everything, holding Jacksonville to 2 for 10 on third downs, holding the Jaguars to 267 total yards. We saw the passing game come alive late. We even saw 3rd and 1 conversions, Omar Kelly. We saw Alec Ingold convert 2 of them. How about that? So I feel a lot better in the second half after feeling not only queasy, but actually quite nauseous in the first half.
I don't know what we want to credit the slow start to. It could just be the haze of actually having 2 of your team captains incarcerated in handcuffs outside the stadium. Maybe that could happen. Yeah. They were off to a slow start. I thought at the beginning it was, they practice hard, but everybody in unison practicing it doesn't necessarily happen. So we could be looking at a slow start as a team, even though they've gotten off to traditional fast starts. Now they're a franchise that's won 4 straight season openers after this fourth quarter comeback, which does count as a kill for Tua Tagovailoa. Fourth quarter comebacks, even though they kicked the field goal, he and the offense did drive down the field. Very interestingly enough, Jeff Wilson played a major factor in that game. But we'll get into all of that. But we got to begin with how the day began, Barry, which is the weirdest, most Dolphins thing that I've ever heard. Let me just put it to you as if you're like an alien that does not live on Earth and does not understand what's going on. See, there's this football team that all of Miami is obsessed with. They absolutely adore them. We wait until Sunday to see them play. The star players, they drive their cars to the game. They've probably done it over maybe 150 times. And all of a sudden, this time, the star player of all the star players, he gets stopped for allegedly speeding in a in a stadium, but in a stadium area where we know there's tons of cones, tons of police officers, tons of traffic. And then not only is he stopped for speeding, but he's also taken out of the car, kicked to the ground, allegedly, put in handcuffs, and then his teammates who are coming there to support him and, to help defuse the situation, Calais Campbell, the choir boy of the NFL, a Walter Payton Award winner, a man who is larger than life, but we all know that he's got such a giving and good spirit, probably able to defuse a bomb if put in front of him, is also put in handcuffs. Barry, please explain this and make it make sense.
Well, we're not going to know the full story until we see the body cam footage and the audio and until the police investigation. But the initial instinct is that it seemed excessive. And again, I've got to add the caveat that we don't know anything from the body cam or the audio. But you would think that even if Tyreek said something back, and of course Tyreek says he wasn't disrespectful, but even if he said something to the police that they didn't like, was there a step that could have been taken between telling him he's being given a citation and him being handcuffed? You think that there should be a step between those two things. So that makes you wonder. And also Calais Campbell, as you said, most gentlemanly man in the world, 2019 Walter Payton Man of the Year award. And for him to be handcuffed for what he said was getting too close to the incident, which he was trying to defuse. He said police told him you couldn't get within 25 yards. He insisted he was outside of 25 yards. He said he was also told he didn't move his car quickly enough. But why should any of this prompt handcuffing? Again, obviously, we've heard a lot about police brutality over the years. Javon Holland has spoken of that after the game. No one can dispute it's a reality in America. You could make the case. We're not going to know for certain, obviously, until the investigation is done and body cam footage is released. But your reaction seeing this, Omar, just a pure emotional reaction was what?
Fear. And when I saw Tyreek, and not for Dolphins, but it just, as a black man in America who's traumatized by police, it brought up all kind of fearful reactions. I don't look, as a black man in America, I don't look at police as help in any situation. Even if I call police to my own house, I am very fearful, and I don't let police in my house. It's just terrifying. And I have to think that this was traumatizing for Tyreek. Calais admitted it was traumatizing for him to have been put in handcuffs. Like, I don't think until you've been put in handcuffs by a police officer, I don't think it hits people, no matter what it is. I remember when I was younger and had sports cars, and it didn't matter what speed I was driving, I just kept getting stopped by the police, who were always checking for something and checking my tints. And and now keep in mind, I was at one point married to a police officer, so I know the challenges that they have. I know the fear that they live with on a daily basis. And seeing a 6'7", 330-pound African-American male in Calais Campbell is a scary thing, because you're an officer and you're smaller than him, and he's coming to a scene that he's trying to defuse, but you don't know him. Well, you should know him, but you don't know him. And you don't know if he's going to be a threatening individual. Now, understand that none of this makes sense when you think of it from this perspective. These officers who are at the stadium in large mass and large quantity, you know who pays their salary, Barry? The Miami Dolphins. They're there because of the Miami Dolphins. They're paid by the Miami Dolphins. They are to make an event safer. Now, imagine, do you think that Tyreek felt safe in that environment? The whole thing is just so traumatizing. I'm glad that Tyreek eventually had a good game, caught a long bomb, because now he can put it in his past. But I'm sorry, there's trauma that lasts, and I would think that that's one of the incidents where trauma is going to be lasting. And I don't know if this is the last we've heard of it. Hopefully, the body cam footage, if it was turned on, and I will say this on my platform, on our platform, because I think it's very important. Police officers should always wear body cameras, and they should always have them turned on. And if an officer turns his body camera off, he should be automatically suspended.
Right. It suggests you have something to hide if you turn it off. Here's one thing I just can't get past at all. Calais Campbell, us knowing him, and of course, no one can know anyone completely, but knowing what we know about Calais, our interactions with him over the course of 2 decades, it's hard for me to imagine that if a police officer warned him and said, if you don't back up from the scene, and if you don't move your car, you're going to be put in handcuffs. It's hard for me to believe Calais Campbell would disregard that. So it seems to me, and again, I know we're speculating, but it seems to me as though handcuffing was done, at least in Calais' case, without warning that it was going to be done, because it's simply unfathomable for me to think that Calais, knowing who he is, would have been warned he was going to be handcuffed and still violated whatever cockamamie rule the police gave him to back up 26 feet instead of 25 or move his car more quickly, when obviously Calais was not looking to incite the incident. He was looking to calm the situation. So I understand that police have to clear the situation and they can't have people wandering around, but I just doubt there was a warning that he was going to be handcuffed. So that's one takeaway I have from this. And as far as Tyreek goes, he said he wasn't disrespectful. He said his mother told him not to behave that way. I guess we'll hear from the audio whether
Let's
he said
put
anything.
a pin in that, Barry, because we also know, and I hate to bring facts into this situation, we also know Tyreek is a habitual liar. And I hope he's not lying
in the past, yes. But I just wonder, did he say anything that would make a group of officers feel so threatened that they had to take him to the ground and handcuff him? Could there not have been a step in between, a stern warning saying, look, we know you're a Miami Dolphin, but if we hear one more word out of you, then we're going to handcuff you? It seems to me like that step was missing. And again, without hearing the audio yet, perhaps that step did occur, but that's one thing that I just can't get past with this.
Unfortunately, Barry, and I've seen this a lot, I've experienced this a lot, officers feel the empowerment of God, and there's a lot of times abuse of power. Like if you would look at an officer and look at all the complaints that has ever been made of an officer, I guarantee you'll see a lot of abuse of power. Not that it matters, because they have all the power. And unfortunately, in situations like this, it leads to very dangerous and toxic situations. And I can't remember who said it. Maybe Javon Holland said it. Imagine if it wasn't Tyreek Hill. And you know, it happens to males every day. It happens to people every day. And certainly African Americans or people of color are disproportionately victims of it as well. But let's move on. It just another page to turn in the saga of as these Dolphins turn. I remember the last incident with police was Miko Grimes getting arrested before the game. Another situation where there's allegedly abuse of power. Those charges were dropped, but man, we really, I think we really got to have a nice long speech with our law enforcement officers. And then we also got to address some of the parking situations if that was a factor. Unfortunately, I was dealt with some parking mishaps as well, but it's first game jitters. We'll figure this out. Let's get to this game, Barry, because this team came out flat. They performed kind of disappointingly. They were trailing Barry 17-7 at the half. And then Tua Tagovailoa gives the team a halftime tongue lashing. Do you think more empowered Tua because of the money? Do you think this is just maturation and age? Do you think he's just, what's going on here, Barry?
I think it's a comfort level and a confidence that only success on the field could have breeded for him. He knows he's good. He led the NFL in passing, and he knows that he's now empowered by Mike McDaniel to speak to his teammates this way. And from all indications, it worked. It didn't work immediately to begin the third quarter, but it worked over time. Of course, none of this would have mattered if Javon Holland hadn't poked that ball out, right, deep in Dolphins territory as Jacksonville was about to go ahead 24-7. Kader Kohu, fortunately for Miami, was able to pounce on the ball, but that really was the first step that led to all of this. And to his credit, he was inaccurate on some throws early. The offense in the passing game clearly out of rhythm. Durham Smythe had one of his worst games, Omar, that I've ever seen him have as a Miami Dolphin. He's usually Mr. Reliable. Braxton Berrios had all sorts of issues. So Tua fought through all of that, ended up entering or exiting Sunday afternoon with the most yards passing in the NFL through week one, at least going into the Sunday and Monday night games, which, of course, is very much like last year when he led the league in passing. So credit Tua for fighting through it. And I also want to credit McDaniel, even though he didn't have a great first half, I want to credit him for the 2 handoffs to Ingold, because I know you've made the point, why is Alec Ingold not in the game more on 3rd and short? Not only was he in the game, but he got 2 carries, which obviously caught Jacksonville off balance.
How do you have a
and
Pro
also
Bowl fullback and don't have them? How do you have a Pro Bowl fullback and don't have them carry the ball on 3rd and short?
And one of the highest paid fullbacks in pro football. And also, I want to credit McDaniel for playing Jeff Wilson, because we saw what an asset he was late in the Dallas game in that game-winning drive. We saw what an asset he was in the 4th quarter today when nobody else could gain consistent yards on the ground. Obviously, Achane had a lot of success through the air, 75 yards and receptions, but Raheem Mostert at 2.3 per carry. Achane was only around 3 per carry. Jeff Wilson gave them a needed boost. How did you like how McDaniel handled the game overall as a play caller, Omar?
Trash. No, I was very disappointed that an offensive genius who has been working on this game plan for 8-9 months, that was what they came out and began the game with. I felt like it was like a lazy game plan. Let's test this out. Let's test that out. Let's see this. Like, come on, where's the creativity? And yes, drops, penalties, sloppy, the communication, coming late out the huddles. Those are all factors in how they perform. But Lord have mercy, I expect way better from Mike McDaniel than that first 20-play script. It just was not doing anything for me, especially the run game. The run game was very disappointing. I have higher opinion of Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane. It didn't start working until Jeff Wilson. Tua Tagovailoa was the leading rusher on the team until Jeff Wilson actually got into the game and was effective on his 5 carries for 26 yards. What I do like about what Mike McDaniel, and I do believe this to be consistent, is he adjusts his approach based on riding the hot hand or who is doing well. Jeff Wilson, the inside zone was working with him. They kept going. Now, could have been the 4th quarter. Maybe the Jacksonville Jaguars were melted by the heat and humidity, even though they're a Florida team. Who knows? The passes to Achane, they were working. They kept that going. Seven receptions for 76 yards. And obviously, we all know what Tyreek does. It just takes one play. It just takes one opportunity for him to get behind somebody or make somebody miss, and then it's off to the races. I didn't think he had a good game, but anytime you score a touchdown,
I thought Tyreek's game under the circumstances, or even not under the circumstances of being given a citation, being handcuffed before the game. I thought he had a really good game. One thing I agree with you with
based on the circumstances, yes.
Yes. One thing I agree with you on McDaniel not having as good a game plan early on as I would like is, why no Jonnu Smith? Why 1 catch for 7 yards? Why no more targets? Why did they throw out all of these running plays, these George Kittle-like jet sweep running plays at preseason?
They tried them a little bit. They tried them a little bit. It wasn't working.
Yes, but it wasn't nearly enough. I'll be okay with it if they were simply saving him to unleash against Buffalo on Thursday. But if he's underutilized Thursday too, it's going to bother me a little bit, because he was supposed to be the weapon that could solve things when the offense was in a rut. And the offense was in a rut. The first 4 possessions, no points. I would have liked Jonnu to be more involved. And I realize that coverage dictates a lot of this. And Durham Smythe was the open guy. And unfortunately for him, he had 2 drops, which is very uncharacteristic for him. But I would have liked them to try to inject a little more Jonnu, even if it was simply on the jet sweeps, the reverses, or something else early on.
Yeah, I agree. I'm obsessed with the Jonnu Smith play package.
Group of plays is what you're trying to say, not package.
Yeah. I don't, hard for me to criticize. My biggest criticism is the run game looked poor. And, that feeds into my concern about the interior of the offensive line. And I'm not saying that things can't change. Maybe the tackles contribute to that as well. I don't think Tehran was Tehran, but did Tehran look like a dominant run blocker in that game? No. And my standard for him is much higher than just Joe Schmo. Liam Eichenberg, even on the touchdown run, he did his job. He paved open a hole for Devon Achane, and props to Liam. Then there was also some sacks. Tua was sacked 3 times. Austin Jackson was got him victimized for one, and Liam Eichenberg victimized for another. I can't remember who the other sack was to. But I you know what I liked about the game and what I saw? I did like they threw a lot of passes to the tight ends and the fullbacks. Durham Smythe got 3, Ingle got 1, Julian Hill got 1, and then Jonnu Smith. Where's Jonnu? Jonnu Smith got 2.
Yeah, he got 1 pass. It should have been more. And
Yeah,
I realize
I'm talking about targets.
Yeah, true. They're coming from a low bar with tight ends. Fewest catches in the league last year, only team without a touchdown catch. So I know it's a low bar, but I kind of would have liked for them to utilize their tight ends as much as the University of Miami did. And remember, also had their worst production ever from tight ends last year, much like the Dolphins did last year. So I'd like to see more from Jonnu. I want to mention something off your point about Eichenberg. Do give him credit, as you did on Twitter, for a very good block on the long run, but he also found himself on his back. You made the point to me. He falls down too often. He fell down on all of the sacks, even the one that was on Austin Jackson. And also, where was the road grading Aaron Brewer in the run game? I know we got to give the guy some slack. He's missed almost 4 weeks with a finger injury, or with a hand injury, I should say, not the finger. But where was that Aaron Brewer that was portrayed to us as a dominant run blocker? I know they're more of an outside zone team than an inside zone team, and they did have success late with Jeff Wilson running up the middle. Brewer gets a little bit of the credit for that. But where was the dominating run blocking center early in the game? I need to see it.
No, you make a very valid point. I have to watch the coaches film to really analyze the offensive line and really get in depth with what's going on. But there were clearly some issues. Now, Jacksonville got a lot of talent on the front line.
Yes.
So maybe it's an opponent situation. Maybe the fact that the heat and humidity didn't melt the Jaguars and like it had done for so many opponents. I don't know. I am not a person who rushes to judgment. So I know they have what it takes to be successful running the football. I know they have talent there. But that 81 yards on 25 carries performance, that was not it. Tua did what I expect him to do. He would have performed better.
Right. And Rob Jones with the 2 penalties as well.
What'd you say?
Yeah, I was going to mention Rob Jones with the 2 penalties as well. So the guard play was not great today. It was adequate. It needs to be better. Rob Jones, I don't know if it was a case of him just being called on penalties that maybe wouldn't be called on players. Was called for 2 costly penalties. Guard play has to be better. Guard play has to be better overall.
Yeah. Tua, after the speech, obviously they performed a little bit better from an offensive stuff, from defense and everything standpoint. What did you think of Tua's performance overall?
I thought it was good. He was off on some throws early. Obviously, no points in the first 4 drives doesn't reflect well on their quarterback, but I thought he held his composure. He was generally accurate. He missed the 2 long throws early, but he gets credit for completing the one to Waddle across the field, the deep one to Tyreek. I thought his game was good overall, and we've got to remember, even if it's not a perfect Tua, it's still better than a third of the quarterback play we're seeing in the league, Omar. It's better than the 96 yards from Caleb Williams today. It's better than Will Levis. It's better than at least a half dozen quarterbacks I can reel off. So Tua with a passer rating of 100.7 and 336 yards, even if it's not perfection, even if they only scored 20, it was good enough for a win today, and that has to count for something.
Mm-hmm. Defensively, Barry, they finished out the game. Not only did Javon Holland, he deserves a lot of credit for that play. I am officially going to keep count of the impact plays Javon Holland makes this season. I put 20 on. I put a goal of 20. He's at 2 already. I believe he stopped a 3rd down in the scoring territory, which keeping it from becoming it and keeping it just a field goal instead of a touchdown. And then he knocked out the football on the forced fumble. Those are 2 impact plays. If he could do that every single week, I don't even need 2. I could just take 1. Then maybe we can sit here and say, hey, this is an elite safety. It deserves top 5 safety salary. But for them to finish the game, and this is how defensively, they Get the ball back after Jason Sanders field goal ties the game. I believe they have 4 minutes to go. Not Jeff Wilson. David Long.
Yeah, first down play, set the tone immediately defensively with that play, followed by an Ogba sack, followed by a Phillips sack. You can't ask for three bigger plays than that. And I'll tell you what was pleasing about each of those three things. Obviously, the Phillips thing is obvious. What a wonderful story of coming back 9 months after the Achilles and making the most impactful defensive play of the game next to the Javon Holland fumble. Obviously, that was the number one most impactful. But also to see Ogba get heat on the quarterback in the second half, a guy who was a very likable guy, had success here, underutilized and misused by Vic Fangio last year, and to come back and to have an impact today, you have to feel good for him. And David Long is capable of impact plays. Obviously, we've talked about his deficiencies in the passing game, but as a run defender, he's really good. There's no one with more passion for the game than David Long has. So I thought all three of those things were good. Did you leave today feeling better about the defense than you and I felt going into season? Because you and I have had grave concerns about defense, and they were abused early in the game, and they did give up 4.9 per carry on the ground, which is too much. But for the game, they only gave up 267 yards, which is not bad.
I left that game and I stopped it at halftime. I looked at it at halftime and I'm like, they are getting gashed. And yet they didn't have that many yards and they didn't have that many third down conversions. And I'm like, how could this be? I still have more to see about Anthony Weaver's defense. It's not exactly aggressive, or at least it wasn't against Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'm an aggressive defense kind of guy, Barry. I don't. You know, give me a little the woman on the wild side a little bit, Barry, instead of the tame, tame girl who goes to school who goes to Bible study on Wednesday and church on Sunday. That's just who I am, and I would like for Anthony Weaver to give me a little bit more bite to that defense. But Mike McDaniel said something that I really caught. He didn't change or veer from who he was. Maybe he becomes more aggressive when he has a lead. I don't know. I'm still figuring this guy out. But I got to admit, outside of them performing clutch and rising to the occasion, which they did and which is important, that's what good teams do. I wasn't a big fan of what I saw from a defensive standpoint.
Well, one thing, I will say this. I agree with you as far as being gashed against the run in the first half, and they gave up 4.9 per carry for the game, which is far worse than the 3.5 they gave up last year with Christian Wilkins and Raekwon Davis anchoring that defense. That was fifth best in the league last year. 4.9 won't cut it. I do like what they did against Evan Ingram, holding him to one catch for 5 yards. Remember, he caught 114 last year, which led all NFL tight ends. I like them using Holland in coverage some on Ingram. That was good. I think we both emerged from the game with some concerns about Jordan Poyer. And again, we know he's been a terrific player in the league for a long time and a great leader, but obviously he had a couple of breakdowns in coverage today. But I think we can also assume that the Jalen Ramsey we saw in the first half is obviously not the Jalen Ramsey we're probably going to see this year, where Brian Thomas beat him, pass interference, and then for the touchdown. So I think even with Jalen Ramsey not being his normal elite self, they still got out of a game against a really talented quarterback, giving up only 17 points. So even though we can find flaws, even though
is he really talented though, Barry?
Well, I mean, it would have been worse without the Holland play, because then they likely would have gone into the mid-20s, and who knows what could happen from there. But overall, I thought it was a good defensive performance, even though you and I both, I would say, remain concerned about the interior of their defense, and obviously, do they have enough at corner, third and fourth corners? You know, that would be my biggest concern. And also playing with an older safety in Poyer, right? I mean, that's a concern as well. We saw Chop Robinson briefly today. He didn't make much of an impact. It's interesting they gave snaps to Quentin Bell. I've not seen the snap count yet. That gets
I expected Quentin Bell to play. I mean, he's going to be they need a run stuffer. They need a rotation in there, especially when you got Jalen Phillips on the snap count. 13 snaps for Chop Robinson to become a pass rush specialist. That's fine to me. That's an ideal number. I'm not stressed out about it. Quentin Bell is an important run stopper, an important athlete. He deserves opportunity to play as well. And Chop Robinson will play when he outshines Quentin Bell. This organization and this team has shown you They played. Look at Storm Duck and Ethan Bonner. Who in the media would have thought that Ethan Bonner would be inactive and Storm Duck would be the guy replacing Jalen Ramsey?
Yeah. Who would have thought? My biggest surprise is today, no tackles for Jordan Brooks. He was a tackle machine in Seattle. Not saying he had a bad game. He just didn't have an impactful game. And then with Storm Duck, he was second team on their depth chart. You and I saw with our own eyes that he was the first corner in when Ramsey was out. So we'll get an explanation tomorrow. My sense is probably Danny Crossman had some say in this in terms of obviously wanting.
I think they go based on who outperforms who in practice. I really do. If Storm Duck practice,
we'll get clarity on that tomorrow. Yeah. But I mean, was it a mistake though? If Ramsey had re-injured the injury, what would your comfort level have been with Kohu, Saran Neal, and Storm Duck, and sitting there seeing Ethan Bonner inactive? And obviously, Ethan Bonner's not really accomplished anything in this league. He played in some games against Kansas City. He gets praised routinely by Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. We know he's fast. But would you have second guessed that if Ramsey had left early with a hamstring?
You know what's funny? Storm Duck today might have played more snaps in his season opener than Ethan Bonner played all last season. So
during the regular season, right, and had a good play on a run stop.
Yeah,
right. So
if the coaches felt like Storm had outperformed Ethan in practice, which I'm pretty sure is going to be the answer, or had done better on his test of game prep, I'm fine with that. That's not a personnel decision that I'm going to sit there and argue. It just was a little bit surprising, but as you know, Barry, I'm not comfortable with where they are depth-wise. If Class had been arrested and not played in the game, Barry,
oh my goodness,
where would you have been at defensively?
I mean, then instead of 4.9 per carry, they might have averaged 6.1 per carry. There was one good play by Deshaun Hand, which we saw, your guy, Deshaun Hand, but you're right. They just don't seem to have enough interior defensive linemen at the skill level that you need to be a deep playoff team. Obviously, as I've said, I think they're a wild card caliber team. I just don't think they're strong enough interior of either lines. We talked about playing time decisions. There was one that just occurred to me, Omar, I wanted your thoughts on. We saw a lot today of Grant Dubose, a guy who had never played an NFL snap. He played a lot early. We did see Chosen in the game as a fourth receiver late. He was wide open on a play. Tua went the other way, even though Chosen wasn't covered. I was just surprised that of all of the options they had, they went with a guy, Grant Dubose, who did not get in a single game for Green Bay last year. They must have had faith, obviously, in his blocking.
The way they rotate their receivers to keep Tyreek and Waddle fresh, sometimes guys are going to have to be on the field, other guys. And if the Bows learn and mastered the offense, or they simplify things and just allowed him, hey, you will go out there, you run a 9 route, or you go out there and you run a comeback. It works. I'm very curious about the Bows. I hear good things. I've looked at his college film. I'm intrigued. Now, Steve Smith is a big fan of his, which, I believe Steve Smith is one of the best and most trusted evaluators of wide receivers in the NFL. And Green Bay has a really good history of drafting wide receivers, if you do recall that. So it doesn't surprise me. The question is, how much is he going to help and be ready to contribute against Buffalo? Because as Mike McDaniel says, no better way to turn the page and get our attention than the Buffalo Bills, the team that has basically bullied the Miami Dolphins for how long have they been bullying the Miami Dolphins? I could go back to bullying.
12, right? It's been pretty dominant stretch for 6 years. They've been unable, by and large, to stop Josh Allen, except for the Heat game, the game that Tua might have had a concussion, that 21-19 win. They did a pretty good job against him in the game 17 last year, ultimately lost the game. Special teams was obviously a big factor. But as far as Allen goes, they still have not figured out a way to cover Allen with underneath routes, which have absolutely killed them when any of their backs are matched up against linebackers or any of their tight ends. They have a good one now in Kincaid, and stopping Josh Allen as a runner. I know most every team in the league struggles with that. The Dolphins have had particular problems with it. So I'm surprised the Dolphins are a slight favorite Thursday. Would you, does that surprise you? I mean, because the Bills have got their number. The Bills have got their number.
Maybe it's based on what the Buffalo Bills did today, but hey, yes, I'm shocked that they're slight favorites. Shocked. So we will be here recapping Dolphins. Obviously, this is going to carry us until Tuesday, so we can bring you the latest in as Dolphins land turns as they get prepared for Thursday night's game against the Buffalo Bills and their daddy, Josh Allen. All righty, Barry, we will see you on Tuesday.